big statement. So we are deeply, deeply grateful for you taking the time and spending this evening to meet with the speakers, but also for the cause. And to introduce myself, my name is Shakeel Syed. I am privileged to serve the Board of American Muslims of Palestine, and in that capacity, I'm here with all of you today. The program this evening is really enriching in a very short period of time. Typically, if we have one professor in the hall, we can learn a lot. If there are two, you figure it out. So we are blessed to have these two people under one roof at one time in one place. So I am extremely excited to learn from them. We are the students and they are the teachers. So I'm looking forward to learn a great deal from them. Tonight we also were supposed to have a dear sister who many of you I'm sure knows, Sister Amani Barakat. And very, very unfortunately, her beloved father passed away. And as a consequence, she is where she should be, at home with family. So keep her in your thoughts and prayers, and I hope and pray that she would be able to join us at another occasion. Amani has been extremely, extremely active in greater LA area. Many of us may have marched with us in the protest rallies, and she's a longtime activist, a dear friend, and a sister whose passion for liberation of Palestine is second to none. So we extend our deepest condolences to her and her family, and may Allah give her father Firdaus al-Ala and Sabr Jameel to her and her family. So the program this evening is as follows. Very shortly, our dear brother Khalid Beydoun, who traveled from out of state to here to be with us, will speak and share some reflections on the topic of the evening, followed by Dr. Hatem Bazian, who then will also share some reflections about the Islamophobia Study Center that he founded and he runs today. How many of you don't know Khalid Beydoun? Okay, so ask the person who is sitting next to you who is Khalid Beydoun. That will save us some time. But Khalid is a law professor and author of several books and considered to be a prominent speaker on the issue of Middle East politics, Islamophobia, and we are deeply honored to have him this evening to spend some time with us and tell us what Islamophobia looks like in this country, in our society, and how do we deal with this, what are the underlying causes of this, and what responsibility do we all have to negate that or to mitigate that in our own ways. So please join me in welcoming Professor Khalid Beydoun.
Assalamu alaikum. It's great. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to say just from the jump that I've been very ill, so if I don't have the energy that I typically have, my apologies. But I'm here, alhamdulillah. It's a great honor to be back here in California. It's a special honor to be with a dear friend of mine and somebody I've long considered a mentor, Dr. Hatem Bazian, who is, in many respects, the pioneer of Islamophobia studies in North America, not only in the United States, but across this continent. One of the first academics, one of the first thinkers, one of the first scholars to really take hold of this term that we all now know very well today as Islamophobia. He was doing it very, very early on and championing it at the University of California, Berkeley, when I was still coming through undergrad and law school, and then finally making my way as a law professor. So I'm going to be frank, I'm going to be candid. I haven't written a single speech during the beginning of this genocide. It's been really difficult for me to, put pen to paper, try to reduce my thoughts to words, sentences, phrases. So I'm going to continue in the tradition of just, speaking from just the top of my head. But during the course of today, and I've been sick, I've been in bed sadly, all day long. I was trying to think about the primary theme for what my talk would be, and the words that kept on rising to the fore of my mind were, we are very much at the forefront of genocidal Islamophobia. Let me repeat those words. We are at the forefront of this new phase, this new era of genocidal Islamophobia. And I'm going to demystify and talk about what that means specifically, but before I do that, let me walk you through an arc of what Islamophobia has looked like for the last 2 decades, right? So the term obviously in North America achieved popular academic political purchase in the post 9/11 context, when the War on Terror was launched, when the Bush administration began to assemble this architecture of Islamophobia. When I mean architecture of Islamophobia, I mean specifically the establishment of what I call structural Islamophobia. And by that I mean the establishment of the Department of Homeland Security, the passage of very sweeping and strident laws like the Patriot Act, like NSEERS, the establishment of then the Obama administration, you might have heard of countering violent extremism, which brought forward a new form, new frontier of surveillance deep within Muslim communities, onto Trump, which obviously Trump was in many respects a crescendo or a climax of structural Islamophobia with the enactment of policies like the Muslim ban, for instance. But in addition to policy, we also see a new level, a new degree of brazen rhetorical Islamophobia, right? Trump was saying things like Islam hates us. We all remember that. December 7, 2015, which now feels like a lifetime ago. He gave a speech in Iowa when he introduced what we now know as the Muslim ban, that it is my idea, it is my objective to put a stop to the entry of Muslim immigrants until we know what's going on. And at that juncture, we all watched our televisions and our phones, right? These Black Mirrors. Anybody watch the show Black Mirror on Netflix? I'm a huge fan of that show, even though it's bleak and dystopian, right? It's very sort of prescient and kind of like foreshadowing the kind of challenges, the digital challenges that we all have right now, and obviously we're seeing all that come to a fore in Gaza. And I'm going to talk about Gaza in a bit, but I'm still getting there, right? We thought when we were watching Trump introduce the Muslim ban and ushering in this new era of explicit, brazen Islamophobia, that was very much the climax, that it couldn't get any worse than that we had reached the mountaintop, if you will, of the most demonized, the most destructive forms of Islamophobia. But we sit here today, at various intersections, the intersection of not only more than a year of genocide in Gaza, the intersection of a genocide spilling into imperial I can't even call it imperial genocide, but we see the sort of new neo-Israeli imperialism looking to redraw and reshape the contours of the Arab world in ways that we thought were buried, at a time when names like Balfour and Sykes-Picot were ruling over European empires, but now they've rose to the fore again. We're obviously sitting at the intersection of this presidential election, which is in roughly, 2.5, 3 weeks or so? Time has become a blur for me, right? I don't know what month it is, what day it is half the time as a consequence of this genocide. So we're sitting at those various intersections, but there's one intersection that I think traverses and supersedes them all in terms of nefariousness, in terms of perniciousness, in terms of inhumanity. And that intersection is the fact that we are standing at the fore of genocidal Islamophobia, trumping, pun intended, the most threatening forms of Islamophobia that we watched in horror roughly 9 years ago. In Islamophobia that we see right now in real time, in a rolling genocide that has slaughtered 200,000 people. What we're going to learn in the coming months and years is that this number that they're rolling out of 40,000 people killed is a gross understatement. Even more than a gross understatement, it's a criminal understatement. A genocidal Islamophobia, and I teach at a law school, that's what I do for a living. It's funny, when I talk to most young people, they just think I'm the social media face. They don't actually know that I teach at a law school and, I've earned tenure and I've written books and academic articles. But I teach at a law school and I take that very seriously. And when you understand where you have to work every day and understand that there is no standing college or university on the ground that exists right now in Gaza, that is a damning indictment that it is in fact something more pernicious than a genocide. The fact that they're destroying and bombing bakeries on a daily basis with the criminal objective of starving people. The fact that as we stand here right now, only hours ago, they slaughtered 73 people in Beit Lahya in Gaza. They turned off the internet yesterday because they wanted this genocide, this massacre that took place hours ago to take place in the dark, as people like Biden and Blinken and Kamala Harris, who was once Attorney General of this state when I was still a law student, and now she's remade herself as, it's funny, they call it diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? We have to support diversity, equity, and inclusion and support people on basis of their racial identity, right? I don't care if you're white, black, brown, pink, or purple. If you're a black woman raising your hand to veto another ceasefire vote at the UN, you're a war criminal. If you're a president or a vice president who is legally culpable for a genocide, you're a war criminal. I said it yesterday, I'll say it again today. I don't want to elect Kamala Harris into the White House. I want to elect her into The Hague. And that's my position. That's my position because I don't like Trump, and obviously you guys know I don't like Trump for the reasons I mentioned only minutes earlier, but let's keep it real. Trump isn't legally culpable for a genocide. Kamala Harris is. And sometimes legal culpability and spiritual mandates are more important than electoral cycles. That's my position, and that's an aside. But we're at the fore of genocidal Islamophobia. Genocidal Islamophobia that has destroyed my father's village in South Lebanon, in Bint Jbel. A genocidal Islamophobia that has displaced 1.8 million people in Gaza and another 1.4 million people in Lebanon. A genocidal Islamophobia that doesn't qualify the explosion of cell phones and walkie-talkies that kills children and leaves grandmothers maimed and handless and armless as terrorism, and sanctions it because Israel has a right to defend itself. That's what they always say. Israel has a right to defend itself. But let me tell you what those words actually mean. When they say Israel has a right to defend itself, they're essentially saying that Israel has carte blanche to commit genocide wherever it pleases. Genocidal Islamophobia. And we see the media complicit in genocidal Islamophobia. Because when civilians die in Deir al-Balah or in Rafah or in South Lebanon or in Beirut in the Dahi area, 600 people in one night. 600 people in one night. The vast majority of them, civilians. What do they call them? Collateral damage. What do they call these children? Sleeping on streets. I have family who are currently sleeping on streets in Beirut. I have family who have been slain. I have family who have been displaced. What do they call them? Human shields. The media is complicit in this narrative, in this system, in this vile schematic of genocidal Islamophobia. Especially, and Allah made it clear for us, He juxtaposed this genocide with what's happening in Ukraine. Let me tell you, sorry, I should put it on silent. My mom texted me. Probably telling me not to say anything that's going to get me in trouble. I have a problem with that usually, as you can see. But look, when the Russian invasion in Ukraine took place, and my position is this: any people, I don't care who you are, I don't care what you look like, if you're an indigenous native people, you have a right to self-determination, you have a right to sovereignty, you have a right to statehood. I was sympathetic to the Ukrainian cause, and I still am. They have a right to defend their homes. But I was watching like CBS and CNN and CBN, whatever, all these acronyms, right? I was watching the news and I was really floored with these really meticulous and detailed and humane vignettes of the people on the ground defending their soil, right? They had like these, I'm a huge boxing fan, right? If you guys know anything about me, my wife's always yelling at me because she's always saying, Khalid, you're watching too much boxing, watch something else, right? But these boxers who come from the Ukraine, people like Vasyl Lomachenko, this world champion, set aside his career making millions of dollars and decided to fight on the front lines, right? These grandmothers, 80 years old, made their homes into soup kitchens where they were cooking for civilian soldiers defending their homes and defending their villages. These beautiful, detailed, right, carefully put together, carefully crafted and curated stories on centrist and conservative and liberal media, talking about the valor and the valiance and all these beautiful adjectives about the Ukrainian people, right? Throwing Molotov cocktails, they're heroes, right? That's what they were saying. But when Palestinians have done the same things and have done less, they're qualified and classified as terrorists. When Kashmiris do that, they call them terrorists, right? They didn't even talk about the Indian invasion of Kashmir in 2019. That didn't make a blip on the news. Why? Because they're brown and Muslim. They're terrorists. Palestinians are brown and Muslim. Some of them are Christian. Doesn't matter if they're Christian because from the Western Orientalist Islamophobic imagination, just as long as you're Arab, you're Muslim, doesn't matter what your religious bona fides actually are. You're somebody who is worthy and only merits death. We are standing right now at the forefront of genocidal Islamophobia. And I don't say that to be flippant. I don't say that as an understatement. I know there's young people in the room, and I'm really not here to paint a bleak picture. You can go home and watch Black Mirror and do that if you'd like. But I want to be frank and I want to be honest, and I feel like it's my responsibility as an academic and specifically a law professor to be honest. That is where we stand right now. That is where we sit tonight. That is the responsibility we all have as Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims and allies and people of conscience, to not only say something, to not only post and protest, but to actually do something. And I've talked about 3 or 4 different convergences, and I want to talk about one more before I sit down, right? We're also at a convergence right now, especially online, of anti-intellectualism, right? Of voices that are strident. Hatem and I were just talking about this at the table. Voices that take strong, ideological, dogmatic positions, right? Because they want to go viral. That's their objective. Intellectual honesty is not the objective. Principle is not the objective. Research is not the objective. Virality is the new form of propaganda that people online take to. So we're at this intersection of all these vile things happening, threaded with the idea that the knowledge we're consuming is flat, right? It's Manichaean, it's black and white. It's not well researched, it's not well cited. I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna keep it entirely real with you guys tonight. I hate social media, I'm not a fan of it. The only reason I'm on it is because I fully understand now that not only young people, but vast generations of people only consume information digitally. They're not going to read my books. They're not going to read our academic articles. They're not going to read our op-eds. They're not going to attend law school classes. So you have to meet people where they are. That's what that great educational scholar from Brazil, Paulo Freire, wrote, right? Right. You got to meet people where they are in order to educate them, and I take that very seriously as an educator. That's why I'm online. But the role of the IRDP, the Islamophobia Research and Documentation Project, has never been more vital than it is right now. It's important, the importance of this institution that I've been a part of since 2012, I believe it was, and before I became an affiliate faculty member, I would attend conferences as a student, I'd read the research. Brother Hatem and I have known each other for a long time, largely on account of his work on Islamophobia, but also our activism on Palestine. Its importance is a direct reflection of the gravity of where Islamophobia is. So now that we've reached the point of genocidal Islamophobia, this center's work is more important today than it's ever been. It has to respond to the challenges coming from the pro-Israeli propaganda machine. It has to respond to the range of destructive, genocidal, ethnic cleansing policies coming from this administration, which is entirely co-signed what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in Lebanon. It has to respond to the dangerous dragnet of policies that are on the horizon if Trump is elected, because the reality is, and we were just talking about this, is that Trump's domestic policies are a lot more suppressive. They're a lot more criminalizing of pro-Palestinian voices in Muslim civic organizations specifically. I want to talk about that more specifically, but I know there's cameras on me, and I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm not going to talk about that, but I'm happy to talk about that with you guys in person later on. What really scares me with Trump is his crackdown on Muslim organizations that have ties to elements that he deems to be terroristic. But the fact of the matter is, we're all terrorists based on skin tone in the faith that we profess. So I've been very sick, I've been very busy, but I had to come here tonight because this center's work is more important today than it's ever been. Ever been. Intellectual production on Islamophobia is more vital today than it's ever been. And let me tell you, it's not only an intellectual exercise. I work on a college campus. When students are getting arrested as a consequence of attending protests or being at encampments, which organization's work do you think is producing the knowledge that enables law firms and legal defense agencies and law professors to be able to protect these students? And when these students are punished, to be able to extend redress to these students. This one. When individuals are losing their jobs, doctors and pharmacists and nurses and academics and police officers and corporate individuals and bankers, because they put a post up talking about the genocide or like the post or something far less innocuous or more benign. Which institution is producing the research that enables lawyers and legal defenders and advocates to be able to protect them? I'm going to give you one more, and this is a study Hatem and his colleagues did last year that I read and that I cite all the time. Who uses social media frequently? Just a show of hands. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll follow you back. I'll try. Well, the reason I bring this up is, and this is a study everybody should read. I think it was 6 months ago, correct me if I'm wrong, Hatem, he put together a study on Islamophobia within the big tech Silicon Valley industry that really clearly delineates and distills how big tech giants like Meta, right, like X and Twitter, all those guys, TikTok is different because it's Chinese owned, right? So their algorithm has a different political slate and political objective. How these big tech giants, right, are producing algorithms, not only algorithms, but policies, and more than just policies, have intimate connections with Israeli governmental agencies that are cracking down, that are censoring, that are shadow banning, that are flagging. This is the research that has enabled people like me to be able to resist online the kind of censorship that we face on a daily basis. Research is not just research during times of crisis. Research becomes something far more practical, something far more tangible, something far more necessary for providing the kind of protective measures that are needed for lay people, for young people, for students, for academics, for everybody, especially those, and I'm not going to say brave enough to speak up on Gaza or speak up on Lebanon or speak up on Yemen. That isn't bravery, to be honest with you. People, I go to all these events all the time, they're thanking me. I'm like, thanking me for what? Standing at home, sitting at home on my couch, putting up a post? That isn't bravery. That's the very lowest threshold of what any individual should do during times of genocidal Islamophobia. Bravery are those people sleeping on the streets in Beirut, having survived the bombing. Bravery are those people right now who've survived, lost ones who have been slaughtered directly in their face. Bravery are individuals with intents that are being burned down while their bodies are still connected to IVs. That's bravery. The very minimum that we're doing right now is not bravery. It is the very least thing we can do to remain human, to feel human during times of genocide. We're absorbing what we've absorbed over the course of 1 year. It's too much for any one human brain to have to absorb, especially on a daily basis. I want to close on this note and say that, look, one thing I've realized during the course of this past year is the considerable privilege that I have and that we have to not have to endure genocide, to not have to endure illegal and criminal sieges of neo-imperial states, feeling entitled to lands for whatever reason they deem fit. I'm going to share a personal story and then shut up. I'm a child of a father who fled war in Lebanon. I lived 2 years of my life as a child in war-torn Beirut. I remember the images of that civil war very starkly in my mind, and they become more stark since this genocide has began. My mother was a woman from Cairo, right? And I know, having come from that circumstance, that it could very easily have been me living over there during all this horror that's taken place. Many of you probably come from places like Gaza and the occupied territories and Kashmir and India, where Islamophobia is craven and destructive. Lebanon, Syria maybe, Yemen. I'm from Detroit. We have a massive Yemeni population. Many of my best childhood friends were Yemeni. But we're here. We're here. Allah chose us to be here. Allah adorned us with the privilege of being here. And that privilege comes with considerable responsibility. If it means anything right now to be Muslim, it is to be deeply connected. It is to be proximately tethered. It is to be routinely invested in doing anything and everything that you can, not once, not weekly, but on a daily basis, for the millions of people who look like us and believe like us, pray the same times that we pray, fast the same times that we fast, speak the same language that we speak. When I see these older mothers having to walk miles and miles and miles from their villages all the way down toward the Egyptian border, I don't know about you guys, but I see my mother. When I see these young children with amputated legs and arms who are named Zainab and Khalid and Muhammad and Marwa, I don't know about you guys, but I see my family. I see my nieces, my nephews. When I see these men, let's talk about the men for a second, right? Let's talk about masculine Islamophobia and the idea that all men and boys are fair game for mass arrest and mass killing, stripped down, naked, rounded up and lined up as if they were cattle. I don't know about you guys, but I see myself. I see my brother. I see my father. Genocidal Islamophobia is not an intellectual exercise. It's not an area of research. It's not a subject of study. It's a phenomenon that is occurring right now as I stand here and as you sit here tonight. We have the privilege to be here tonight. But my head and my heart is not here. For this past year, it's been in Gaza and it's been in Lebanon every day around the clock. And with that privilege comes responsibility. How you exercise that responsibility is up to you, but exercise it. But I'm here to tell you tonight, right now, that one way in which you should exercise it is to not, I said this last year, I'm going to say it again. It was better times last year, Hatem, when we toured. It wasn't the genocide. We had better times. We were happy. We were able to smile and laugh. But I said, don't donate to the center. It's more than just donation. It's investment. It's investment. It's investment in your children. It's an investment in your best interest. It's an investment in making sure that these genocidal Islamophobia chapters, fronts and frontiers that we're facing right now are reckoned with properly by scholars that equip people on the ground with the ability to fight. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Khalid. I know it's very, very difficult for all of us. I don't know how to summarize or how to pick anything from what Khalid said. But we learned a new term, genocidal Islamophobia. You know, some of us may remember who are old enough after 9/11, the answer to Islamophobia was to teach about Islam, to share about Islam with the people who are very afraid about Islam. We went to schools and colleges and universities. None of us went to Islamic school to learn all about Islam, but turns out that we knew more than enough to help people understand what Islam is so that their fear is mitigated. And if they don't love us, at least they are not an enemy of us. And Islamophobia blinds, any phobia blinds us, right? So the first victim of Islamophobia in this country was not a Muslim. Ravinder Singh Bhalla, a Sikh person who was shot dead in a grocery shop in Phoenix, Arizona, if my memory serves right. So phobia is something that really blinds us. The second thing that I picked from Brother Khalid is, you know, his reminder to us about our privilege. In the next few hours, we will go home and we will very comfortably slip under the covers and read a book or watch Netflix or maybe read some news, have ice cream, and then go to sleep. You know, the reference point for us of difficulty is driving from wherever we are to here. The reference point for somebody else, people who are currently in Gaza, or in Lebanon, or in Syria, or in Yemen, is a matter of life and literally death. Dramatically opposite perspective and reference that they are in. While it is extremely depressing and disheartening, but we cannot become hopeless. I'm reminded of the Quranic injunction, وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Right? Despair, hopelessness is absolutely not in our verbiage, not in our psyche, not in our tradition. We got to remain steadfast and do the best that we can in the capacity that we have within our sphere of influence and outside. And lastly, as also was reminded about the IDRP, right? This is not really for us. We are literally witnessing a genocidal Islamophobia. It's not for us. It's for my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. If it was not for those historians who recorded the history and the oppression of other empires, we would not have known what happened to the people then. Same is true today, that what's happening in our name, your tax dollars, my tax dollars, in daytime murder, mayhem, carnage of innocent men, women, and children on a daily basis, right? It's not for us. I don't need to know much about Islamophobia or the research that IDRP is doing. But it is for my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that we need to make that investment of time, of resources, of energy, so that this is never forgotten. And I'll close with this before I invite Dr. Hatem. About 15, 16 years ago was my first trip to Palestine. I prayed in Masjid al-Aqsa on Yom al-Jummah, like we would do. After Salat, the gentleman who was sitting next to me, Abdul Rahman Sneh, I don't know much Arabic, he didn't know much English. We exchanged greetings as we do. And I did my meditation, sunnah, nawafil, just enjoying the spiritual experience in that space for a good amount of time. After about 45 minutes or an hour or so, when I left, or when I stood up from where I was sitting, exiting outside of Masjid al-Aqsa from the main door, this gentleman was standing waiting for me. And I thought he is waiting for somebody else, and I said my salams to him again, and then he grabbed my hand, and then he tells me, you got to come and eat with me. So number one, he didn't disturb my meditation and stuff because he knew that I'm coming here for the first time. He wanted me to have my spiritual fill. And then he waited for me for an hour at the door, making sure that I don't leave. And then he took me to his house. And then he fed me like a feast. After a long conversation, when I was leaving, I asked him, in the next few days I'll go back home, things will be fine for me, and you will continue to remain in this situation. Tell me, what can I take a message from you for my friends, for my family, for my brothers and sisters in the United States? And he said the following, and I repeated verbatim because it's etched in my memory. He said, Brother Syed, he took my last name, he said, Brother Syed, go tell your brothers and sisters, we will defend Masjid al-Aqsa, myself, my children and grandchildren, for your children and for your great-grandchildren. Tell them to come and visit us in Masjid al-Aqsa. May Allah give them the courage and help us to learn of the steadfastness of istiqamah from the people who face death every day, but never bow down to oppressors, hold their head high and fight back and resist. So your being here today is that form of resistance as well, while you had choice to go somewhere else. Let's, inshallah, welcome Dr. Hatem Bazian, who is a lecturer at UC Berkeley. Many of our children have gone there. Many of our children have been his students, who really thought about this, what Muslims' life in the United States would look like 20 years, 40 years, 50 years down the road. And hence, he established the Islamophobia Studies Center in Berkeley. I have the privilege of serving the American Muslims of Palestine board with Dr. Hatem, who is the chairman there. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Hatem Bazian.
Thank you. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Usually whenever I start, I first actually give recognition to our indigenous people because we are living and existing on stolen land. And as Palestinians who are facing continued settler colonialism, we cannot speak in this land without centering those who have suffered and have really lived the byproduct of a settler colonial genocidal campaign, and we're still unfolding today. The second is also our black brothers and sisters were brought to this country as cargo, as a commodified human beings, and for literally 400 years continued to challenge and redefine the moral, ethical arc of this country, and still have not lived up to that history and that legacy. And in California, at least, also we need to recognize our Latino brothers and sisters because this is their land as far as California. And the fact that we continue to demonize the immigrants on a daily basis, even though that without immigrants, nothing can actually function in this country, and we know that for a fact. Just let people think about this reality. And you cannot fight Islamophobia without simultaneously always be against anyone that uses xenophobia, anti-immigrant discourses, demonization of any of the communities that have ended up here because this country and Europe were there. Right? Many people say we need to stop immigrants coming. Well, mashallah, we can actually support you in that initiative, but why don't you stop causing wars and intervention that caused the massive amounts of people to come? So I want to say the following. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody sees it and it's not on social media, did it really fall? The reason that I say this is the Watson Institute in Brown University had a research about the deaths in Muslim war zones. They didn't say Muslim, but I'm adding that. Since 9/11, both direct and indirect. Again, this is the Watson Institute. It says the total death toll in these war zones, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, the total death toll in these war zones could be at least 4.5 to 4.7 million and counting. Again, this is not me. This is not my data. This is the Watson Institute at Brown University, that the total number could be at least 4.5 to 4.7 million deaths and counting. Now notice this was before the genocide in Palestine. This is before the attack and the assault on Lebanon. Now I take this data and stretch it a little bit further. Since 1979, the total number of deaths in war zones pertaining to the Muslim world could be upward of 12 million deaths. Again, I said the question in the beginning, if a tree falls in the forest and it's not recorded, it's not seen, there is no image for it, did it really fall? So I said to you, there is 12 million Muslims with some Christian population that lives in the region that have fallen and they are not actually recorded. And I know you and me, we often are given the microphone in front of our face. Do you condemn? You know, Piers Morgan, he thinks like he's cute and like he's sophisticated. The first question he asks of a Muslim in there, do you condemn, right? That's not a question, that is a silencing tactic. Right? He thinks he's sophisticated because he put on some white powder and possibly drank some tea, right? Usually it's Indian tea maybe. And he thinks that he's sophisticated and is allowing people space, because that's what you argue, I brought you in here. It's like if you bring in an enslaved person and you slap them, that is not a conversation. So he thinks that he's having conversation, he's not. He's actually using these Muslim, Arab, Palestinian, and anyone that expresses support to actually get his likes and shares, because his career was going nowhere. So he jumped on the Palestine bandwagon and trying to literally ask the question that the pro-Israel, the AIPAC, the Zionists want to ask, and to silence the Muslims. Now you could still, his conversation, when we have someone else speaking, he never asked that question. He has so many Israelis there. I know that he never asked Tony Blair, do you condemn the fact that 1.5 million Iraqis died under your watch and under Bush? No, you can't, because he's sophisticated, right? Death and destruction is often visited upon the global south as a matter of policy, but it's always excused. So it's very important. If it's not recorded, it's not witnessed, if it's not documented, then it didn't happen. So what we need to understand is, why is it that work and research is very critical? Work and research, documentation, systematic work is very critical. Now I want to jump into, if you could put the slides up. I know that Khalid brought in genocidal Islamophobia, and it's very important. Definitions are very important. Words are very important. If words were not important, why is it that every time you say genocide, everybody is asking, oh, you can't say that word? Why not? Because if you say the word and you define it and you engage it in the public discourse, then you have to actually bring about the consequences of what it is to be complicit in genocide. So there was a systematic process of trying to silence the discussion, silence the debate. So now we have to talk about anti-Palestinian racism. Anti-Palestinian racism is a form of anti-Arab racism. And we already have material on that. So if you haven't read Edward Said, please do so. Right? Make sure that you read Edward Said. Right? Otherwise, you'll think that Huntington Clash of Civilization is saying something. Huntington is basically, literally what Edward Said says is a clash of ignorance. I want to tell you, if you go to page 20 of Huntington, he says, unless we hate what we are not, we can't love what we are. Meaning that he's peddling hate. And they think he's sophisticated. There's no sophistication in peddling hate. There's no sophistication in peddling bigotry. But you need to read to understand when Edward Said says this is a clash of ignorance, and everybody around begin to demonize Edward Said because people are not comfortable with what he said way back with Orientalism. Now you need to know Edward Said was a Christian Palestinian, but wrote one of the first books on the theory of Islamophobia in writing covering Islam after the 1979 Iranian Revolution. It's very important because you'll get what you call Johnny come lately, that what you call all of a sudden discovered the map. Oh, the Christians and Muslims hate each other. Right? And also for those who don't know, Johnny come lately also comes with the sushi theory. Right? If you have not read, I have an article, The Sushi Theory of Middle East Foreign Politics. Everything happening because the Sunni and Shia hate each other, mashallah. I call it the sushi theory, explaining everything out of this, which literally is the attempt to demonize and get people to fight one another. And everybody fight one another, and then they say Allahu Akbar. No, Allahu Akbar on what you're doing. That's what Allahu Akbar is. Selling weapons to both sides, getting the war conflict in there, drawing the resources, right? And then sending us the diplomat to try to solve the conflict between, quote, each other. All right? So again, Edward Said wrote the first book covering Islam. If you actually also want to read about anti-Arab racism, read Jack Shaheen, another Christian Arab that wrote the demonization of Arab in Hollywood, real bad Arab. The last section he worked on was Islamophobia as well. So you need to understand how it's very easy to get people to stalk one another because ignorance tends to build people's attempt to try to demonize and create conflicts where actually none exist. Or if it is, it's a managed conflict throughout history. So anti-Palestinian racism, a form of anti-Arab racism that silences, excludes, erases, stereotypes, defames, or dehumanizes Palestinians or their narratives. Anti-Palestinian racism takes various forms, including denying the Nakba. All right? All these college professors that say, oh, the Nakba did not happen. All right? Or that the Arabs left on their own. I don't know which neighborhoods you come. It's very difficult for 750,000 to get up every morning and just leave their country just on their own. Right? When they speak about Ukraine, rightly so, they say Russians invaded and they tried to empty cities and towns. But Palestine, that there was no Nakba, just people got up and left. Right? So that's again denying the Nakba is part. Justifying violence against the Palestinians. The term that you use when you say Israel has the right to defend itself, this is actually an incitement to genocide. That's what it is. Anyone that says that statement is inciting to genocide because they knowingly actually supporting the genocide has been documented. Human Rights Watch spoke about genocide. Middle East Watch, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, UN Human Rights Commission are all speaking about the genocide that is unfolding. So when you say Israel have the right to defend itself, you are actually inciting to genocide and violence. Now you know this, some of the Zionists will actually quote Benny Morris, who's actually is a good historian, but Benny Morris writes an article says, you cannot make omelet without cracking an egg. You cannot make an omelet. The omelet is Israel. Cracking the egg is the Palestinians. So we had to crack the Palestinians in order to make the Israeli omelet. He's one of the foremost Zionist historians in Israel, part of the new historians. His writing about the border wars and the 1948 period, he documented the massacres, but then continued to defend genocide of the Palestinians. Exceptionalism and justifying violence. Failing to acknowledge Palestinians as indigenous people with a collective identity, belonging, and rights in relations to occupied and historic Palestine. Have you noticed somebody said there's no such thing as Palestinians? All right? Golda Meir said there's no such thing as Palestinians. You're a sophisticated professor teaching political science in this university. There's no such thing as Palestinians, you know. So again, this argument. Okay, if there's no Palestinian, then whom you're fighting? It must be like shadows and, you know, people that just don't exist. Ghosts, right? Maybe for Halloween, right? So again, this denial that takes place. Excluding or pressuring others to exclude Palestinian perspectives. We see this in the political process. Palestinians and their allies, including Jewish Voice for Peace, even Jewish progressives and those who speak against the genocide are also excluded from having conversation and having input in the process. So again, anti-Palestinian racism is adjacent to Islamophobia. All right, so it exists within the framework of Islamophobia and anti-Arab racism, but it specifically aims at the Palestinians. Now there's a history of targeting Palestinians specifically as an avenue for promoting and expanding Islamophobic work. And I want to go a little bit further on here. Many of you possibly saw these ads. Have you seen any of these ads before? If you did, raise your hand. If not, I'll explain these. These ads were actually put on buses post the election of Obama. In any war between the civilized man and the savage, support the civilized man, support Israel, defeat jihad. Creating Islamophobia in the public sphere was linked directly to anti-Palestinian discourses. These buses were in San Francisco, in Chicago, New York, in Seattle, right, running and funded to demonize Palestinians in order to justify the policy that is actually put in place. Now, I need to go back to the granddaddy of the Islamophobia industry, or the Islamophobe par excellence, which is Daniel Pipes. He said, I worry very much from the Jewish point of view that the presence, increased stature, and affluence and enfranchisement of American Muslims will present true dangers to American Jews. So that was Daniel Pipes. And Daniel Pipes continued to promote some of this, but I'll tell you something else. Daniel Pipes now goes to the Arab world. He actually goes and advises some of the Arab countries on how to deal with the Muslim threat in the Arab countries. That's our problem, among many, right? So again, next to him is the person with the hair, right? The bad hairdo there, right? Is Geert Wilders. Geert Wilders is a politician from Netherlands. He's the one that promoted the Muhammad cartoons. Also sponsored the documentary Fitna. Right? He's a neo-Nazi. His party is of neo-Nazi origin, and his party member walked into the Dutch parliament wearing Nazi memorabilia. So again, Daniel Pipes is buddying with Geert Wilders, who's been invited many times in Israel. Which is, again, you know, politics makes strange bedfellows, but this is like a shotgun wedding if you know history. Neo-Nazi parties in Europe see their point of entry back into legitimacy in European politics by affirming and defending Israel, as well as launching Islamophobic discourses all across Europe. So Geert Wilders is welcomed in Israel, celebrated for being anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian, affirming Israel. Marie Le Pen in France is the same. Viktor Orban in Hungary. All are of neo-Nazi parties, historically been deeply anti-Semitic, and I would say you can never recover as a neo-Nazi from being anti-Semitic, so let's just be very clear. They just, what you call, develop the new symptom that is being out in the open, trying to shift the focus on being anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian, seeing that there isn't much traction that they could get. So that's, again, you look at the rising tide of Islamophobia in Europe and the rising tide of neo-Nazi parties that are winning elections on the back of anti-Muslim sentiment, Islamophobia, while committing themselves to defending and supporting Israel and welcomed in that. Now, Zionism and academia, we need to speak about this. How and why the Israel lobby is suppressing free speech and academic freedom on college campuses. This is not just from now, but actually this is from way back. University president administrators become levers in the massive pro-Israel propaganda machine and provide the lubricating oil for the structured Islamophobic campaigns that targets Arab Palestinians, Muslims, progressive Jews, and their allies on college campuses and in the community. University president administrators provide the public relations stage and oxygen for Israel's propaganda machine and create the conditions that further target and marginalize Palestinians, progressive Jewish voices, and communities of color that are challenging Israel. Increasingly, university leadership uses the euphemism campus climate and inclusion strategies as a spear to hit Palestinian activists on campus. The whole notion of campus climate, that came out of pro-Palestine protests in Berkeley, and the university began to organize to try to get a survey and to have a campus climate that literally tried to legislate or put policies on campus that target anyone that speaks on Palestine. And then working on diversity, equity, inclusion, just as what you call symbolic inclusion. And I want to speak to Muslims in here. If you look at the university, just having a woman in hijab on a poster, run the other way. Because they're using just symbolic inclusion on the poster while actually surveilling the rest of the community 24/7. If you don't understand this, understand that they will have a university inclusion officer that might be a hijabi herself, or might be a Muslim, him or herself, coming to speak while the university knows that they have no power other than to continue to surveil and manage the Muslims, because you know if you're a Muslim, you're a troublemaker. All right? If you're a Muslim, you have to be what you call surveilled. If you're a Muslim, you are not a person that is actually to be treated normally. If you don't believe me, just look at what UCLA have done with the encampment. All right? In any university, right? In any university, if thugs from outside the campus come in, the police should be the first to stop the thugs from coming on the campus. Not only that, the thugs are there for 3 hours attacking the student encampment, and the university police were nowhere to be found. You tell me, and I know again, I've been, like I'm, in the US, I'm what you call the most dangerous professors in America. A few years back, I was number 32, so again, you should see where that progression. I know for a fact, as soon as anyone from outside the campus steps on the campus, I know there's the police that know exactly who's who in a highly, highly tense moment on the campus. I know that they have surveillance cameras all over the place. Right? I know that if somebody riding a bicycle on campus, usually they stop them and give them a ticket. So you tell me you could stop somebody riding a bike and give them a ticket, but about 100 thugs come in the middle of the night, attack an encampment, and nobody actually does anything? This show me that the university was complicit, that the university police department knew or had communication with the people that were actually attacking, and the university president actually, or the chancellor, had a complete command or order to people not to interfere in what is taking place. That's what the university actually is responsible. Same thing in Emory University, and same thing in the encampment across. Now, you know many of our police departments have been sent to be trained in Israel. And more so, they actually brought Israeli security forces to train our police in here. In the Bay Area, we had what's called Urban Shield. Brought Israeli intelligence services and so on to train, and they use Islamophobic content in their training, including giving people Arabic words to say while they're acting their scenarios of police emergencies. All right? So aside from all of type of connections that the university has with Israel, including our journalism department or our technology department, aside from that, there's still cooperation at levels that is never seen before. Now, we did the research on tax returns. You know, as nonprofits, you actually have 990 tax returns. We collected about 80,000 pages of tax returns of Jewish federations in San Francisco, in Chicago, in New York, in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, in Newark, and so on. If you have it, I have the raw data. I could send it to you, and you could do, whatever data you want. We found that, again, the San Francisco Federation, among others, were funding Islamophobia. You saw the guy with the bad hairdo, Gerd Wilder? He was funded by the Jewish federations. Daniel Pipes was funded by Jewish federations. Tea Party patriots were funded by the Jewish federations. Now, I say this because, again, I'm just going to be honest about research. Muslims engage in interfaith dialogue with people that are funding your demonization. I refuse to participate in interfaith dialogue. I only will participate in interfaith work for justice. That's it. I have no problem with a Christian or Jewish person that wants to be for justice. I marched with people during the anti-apartheid movement. I marched with people in the Central American Solidarity movement. I marched with people against the prison industrial complex. I marched with people against all kinds of racism during whether it's the George Floyd or Rodney King. And I always had Jewish, Christian, committed clergy for justice. But if you actually have sitting across from you somebody that is funding your demonization, it's not a dialogue. It's not. It is a structural silencing that is taking place and demonization. Increasingly, the ADL and JCRC, again, this is just ADL, is in the structural demonization of Muslims, as well as also black community activists and others. There is no partnership in there to be had. Again, we have it in 9/9. If you want, we could send you the 9/9 return, and you could take a look at this. Jewish Federation, the Diller Foundation funded Project Veritas, the Amcha Initiative, American Freedom Law Center. So anybody know the American Freedom Law Center? You know that we have 34 states that pass anti-Sharia law? Right? Anti-Sharia legislation. And you cannot have Sharia in, and even though we don't have Sharia in the United States, they passed bills in various state legislature in order to create the perception that Muslims are penetrating and taking over our country. Again, Jewish Federations funded this. David Horowitz Freedom Center, Islamophobic Dutch politician Gert Wilder, Clarion Fund. Anybody know Clarion Fund? Anybody know Clarion Fund? No. Again, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody knows about it, Clarion Fund, till today, have funded the most expensive Islamophobic production that we've seen in the 2008 election. Clarion Fund printed 28 million copies of the documentary Obsession, which is the Muslims' war on the West, and they inserted these 28 million copies of the DVD in Sunday newspapers in swing states. So you got your Sunday newspaper and you have a DVD at a cost of $17 million. The most expensive expenditure on Islamophobic type of material. Center for Security Policy, Frank Gaffney, Middle East Forum, Daniel Pipes, the Tea Party Patriots, and these are massive organizations. So when you talk about Islamophobia, we're talking about a conservative estimate is about $150 million that are directed at demonization of the Muslim community. And you think you're dealing with individuals, you are dealing with institutions 24/7 because bigotry, Islamophobia makes it possible to throw the bombs over there and not to think that you're killing human beings. That's why 250,000 Palestinians so far are dead, and it's basically every politician says Israel has the right to defend itself. That Uncle Bush kills 1.5 million Iraqis, and people go and actually buy his paintings as if he has an artist, Picasso, mashallah, right? No charge whatsoever. Tony Blair goes around as a sophisticated diplomat, right? Has his own foundation, the mess in Iraq. All these policies that have destroyed Syria, the attack of Yemen, nothing whatsoever. Right? Again, this is the reality that we are living and existing. So extensive record of funding bigotry, and it is being directed at maintaining a massive military budget in this country and continued warfare abroad. You know, we thought the end of Cold War we were going to have a peace dividend, right? All of a sudden I was going to go to the bank and cash my peace dividend. It's like how much, you know? We still have the largest military budget, which is $821 billion this year. We have a larger military budget than the next 20 countries combined. The United States has 714 bases around the world, large number of them in the Middle East. So in order to maintain this, you have to demonize people. And that's what the demonization gets you. So Israel, post-Cold War, Israel recast its role in counter to prevent Islamic extremists and Arab nationalists, that's what they say, reassert its strategic value with the West, provide training and know-how as a subcontractor, expand its foreign policy reach as to become more viable, India, China, Sub-Saharan Africa, etc., become the go-to experts on countering Islamic ideologies and movements. That's what Israel puts itself in the current period. And it's very important to understand for us that role. So who's producing Islamophobia? We need to be very clear. Pro-Israel activists have been the major contributors to the financing, production, distribution, and usage of Islamophobia in the American context. While other forces are present and do employ Islamophobia in the US, nevertheless, the pro-Israel activists have set up the structural backbone of the Islamophobia operation in the United States. How to keep US unconditional support for Israel in a unipolar world. That's what it is. 70% of all the funding to the Islamophobia industry in this country come from pro-Israel sources. We have the tax returns, we have the information, we have to see where all these resources are being directed on almost a daily basis across this country. And again, these are institutions that fund and promote Islamophobia, is Who's Who, Jihad Watch, Campus Watch, and so on. So these 38 at the core, and almost 115 to 120 organizations on the periphery that produce this massive Islamophobic content. Right? If you're a student, right, Canary Mission, anybody knows Canary Mission? Right? Canary Mission creates a dossier on each individual activist or a person that speaks on Palestine and targets and send it to employers in such a way that they would actually be less susceptible to employ or have individuals that have expressed pro-Palestinian sentiments. So Canary Mission, again, is at the hub of this attempt to demonize our community and push us out of civil society. It's also when Jewish leaders decide to harass college kids to support Israel, so the harassment that you're seeing on campus is actually strategically being deployed. It's not incidental. It's not people just like all of a sudden walking on the campus and, oh, I see a Palestinian flag, I need to complain. We are talking of an investment in the process in order to silence this debate. We noticed that there's actually the Roth Institute report of 2010, which actually began to try to set up the infrastructure of how to target campuses, activists on college campuses, and then Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs took on that task beginning in 2015. So PDS fight to move Strategic Affairs Ministry. So now what we're seeing on college campuses, a foreign government attempting to silence American students' critique of Israel and trying to actually maintain unconditional US support, especially we just sent Israel $22 billion just this past year. And Erdogan, who was the Minister of Strategic Affairs, now he is the UN, lately he was the UN ambassador until his departure from his post, and they actually allocated $25.7 million. In 2017, they set up a whole operation directed at me at Berkeley. Supposedly this operation cost about $2.5 million. All right? Literally setting up a whole intelligence which monitored all of the activity, including human intelligence gathering, dumping flyers on all the cars on my street, calling me and the director of the JVP as a terrorist in this. And that, again, the FBI came upon this because they were investigating Cambridge Analytica with Mercer and the intervention in the UK election, that they actually discovered this intelligence operation run again by the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs. There was a Las Vegas summit. This is the late Sheldon Adelson, major funders of the program, but when casino billionaire Sheldon Adelson and Power Rangers billionaire Hatem Bazian, who's right here in California, invite you for a weekend, you show up. The secret meetings at Adelson Venetian Hotel marked the unveiling of a well-funded effort to oppose the BDS movement on campus. They called the meeting the Campus Maccabee Summit. If you don't know, Shakeel Syed was a major supporter of Trump. He gave Trump $25 million. Now his wife, Miriam Adelson, is committing $100 million to Trump on the condition that if Trump gets elected, that he will actually allow Israel to annex the West Bank. And Trump has already signed, right, on the dotted line on this, and there's $100 million. This is not an endorsement of Kamala Harris, just to be sure. On the one hand, we have a genocide, right, complicity, and on the other hand, we have a Trump who is supporting the annexation of the West Bank. The last election in 2016, he got $35 million from Adelson. He committed to moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, and he did so, and to recognition of Israel annexation of the Golan Heights, which he already did so. So again, just to understand where the work domestically to silence the critique is directly connected to policy, and that's what we need to really understand. So this gets us into what we're here for. So on your table, there is donation envelopes, and there's a QR code. All right, so if you are able to donate to the center, this is what we do. We're leading the academic field in the Islamophobia studies. We have the Islamophobia Studies Journal. We already have 16 volumes. All right, so we just printed, it's all online available. We just printed a copy of each just for you to just examine. It's 139 academic articles. Just to understand, 139 academic articles on the subject of Islamophobia. And we covered the gamut from Islamophobia in Russia to Poland to Islamophobia in Muslim majority state to India to Africa to Latin America, almost every country in Europe. We covered almost every corner of the academic field in order for us to have research and material that you could deploy in the classroom. All right? You could talk about your feeling. I feel I'm discriminated against. MashaAllah, feelings are good, but you cannot deploy it in the classroom. All right? We could bring you to give testimony about your feeling. All right? It just does not actually get us to where we want to be. We formed the International Islamophobia Studies and Research Association with an international board. So we actually have an academic association, and I know Khalid understands what an academic association, because you need to have young scholars, right, that they are going to develop, get their MA, get into PhD. They need to have an academic association that is actually supportive. All right, you go to some of the departments, say, oh, Islamophobia, what is that? All right, so you have to have some form of an institution, so we have that set up. Our first conference was in Turkey, in Ibn Khaldun University. Second conference was at Berkeley. Last year we were at Bosnia conference, and this May 23rd, 24th next year will be in Granada, Spain. So again, we usually get between 50 to 70 papers in this association. So it's very critical in terms of creating the pipeline. Islamophobia Studies Certificate, if you're working, all right, and you have an HR company, or not HR office, we want to make sure that your HR office is trained by people who specialize in Islamophobia, not somebody that is dabbling in Islamophobia, or because you met Khalid who works at the grocery store and he knows where Islam or Mecca is, you bring him actually to speak about Islamophobia. Or you bring somebody who's a partner with the ADL, or the ADL selects the person that actually speaks about Islamophobia with the ADL. They bring them to teach about Islamophobia, which is without any critical lens. So those days of asking and meeting Khalid in the street and bring him to teach about anything related to Islam or Islamophobia are gone. So the certificate will require HR people to have a training. In the same way, if you're a dentist, you have annual training, right? You have to go. If you're a lawyer, you have annual training. If you're MD, right? That you have to have an annual training and certification from a university setting that tells you that you are certified because you took the following. So we need to go systematic in order to understand what is taking place. We also have the Islamophobia reporting app, which is, we're in the final stage of updating the app. All right, so if you get your phone, it's not, we're about to update, so you get report Islamophobia. All right, because again, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody sees it, did it really fall? You could tell me about your feeling. Alhamdulillah, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but I cannot do anything with that. I need data. Data can, over time, change policy. When you go to an encounter with a politician, you say, we have a problem with Islamophobia. Can you tell me what the problem looked like? You need data, right? What we found out with another research with the Haas Institute of Othering and Belonging is that 94% of Muslims don't report. And I know we have, oh, mashallah, it's just they did not mean it. I'll be patient and Allah will reward me. Allah will reward you, but you need to report. اعقل وتوكل. Tie your camel or your Lexus and then depend on Allah. All right? To tell you that, you remember the 3 young Muslims that were killed in Chapel Hill, North Carolina? Right? You know the mom told him to be nice to the guy? Right? Be nice to him, we'll soften up. Don't confuse da'wah with racism. Don't confuse da'wah and speaking to people with white supremacy. Right? So you need to be actually very clear of what is the problem that you are dealing with. And people tend to confuse these two in terms of their engagement. So we want you to report, and if it is serious, we will elevate it to possibly a legal case. Whether we'll send it to CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, we'll send it to MLFA, Muslim Legal Fund of America. I chair the board as well. We could send it to Palestine Legal. We could send it Center for Constitutional Rights, National Lawyers Guild, ACLU. There's ways for us to deal. But if you don't report, we can't do anything. That's it. It just becomes, I have a feeling. It's a good song, right? That's it. That we cannot act on your statement unless we have some type of way to document it. Hopefully this next volume of the app will have ability to capture video instantaneously, so we'll be able to have a video capture as you are reporting this case, right? So country reports, Islamophobia archives, peer review books published on Islamophobia. We want to constantly be a reference when some of our authors, academics, they want to write a book. We want to be a place where the editors send their material so we could actually say and push it forth based on solid research, rather than get some of those antagonistic people that they don't want for our materials to come out. And then conferences and workshops. We have been holding annual Islamophobia conference for the past maybe since 2002. And in France, we've been the only academic outfit that actually holds Islamophobia conference in France, because in France you can't study Islamophobia. You can't actually have on a paper that you actually are engaging in Islamophobia research, because they call you that you are communitarian, you're trying to divide the society. So much so that they closed the organization that used to actually collect the data in France, CCIF, which was our partner. So every December we go down to France and we have a conference to allow academics to share their research on Islamophobia in France. So our next conference is December 11th and 12th in France again, for people to be able to express, because we need the research in order to deal with the problem. If you don't have the research, you can't deal with the problem. If you go to a doctor, diagnostic, you need to diagnose the problem from a social construct in a social science pattern. So this is the Islamophobia Studies Journal, defining the academic field. So all of the journal articles are accessible, open access. So open access at a global level, and we have the metrics to show it, right? So we have year-by-year usage in terms of when we went in terms of online public, open access, we increased access by 4,130%. Used to be paid, we shifted that. We take the cost ourselves to try to produce and have it open access. So the result was 4,130. We estimate on a monthly basis between 10 to 12,000 downloads of our articles in the Islamophobia Studies Journal. And if you take anyone that works in the academic field, right, 10 to 12,000 downloads of an articles from a journal. It's just like you're leading the fields, and you could compete with anyone other than the science field. Right? Sometimes some articles you get 5 or 10 downloads, you say, MashaAllah, you'll go to see the Imam. Right? So literally, this is in front of our eyes that is taking place. So this is our conference in France that is coming up in Paris, December 11th and 12th. And this is our conference that is coming up in, this is the previous one in Sarajevo. And we always partner with local community organization to highlight their circumstances, what they're going through, and they assist us in order for us to actually build those relations. So we highlight their work and also work in a cooperative way. This past year also we released the comprehensive report on the Canadian Islamophobia industry, mapping Islamophobia ecosystem in the Great White North. So that is a complete, which also was presented in the Canadian Parliament as well. So now we have the citations for the Canadian status. Islamophobia, Muslim safety and violence survey, challenging Islamophobia in public schools. We began to write on understanding Christian Zionism, so there's a full report on that, to understand why Christian Zionists are supporting Israel, India, and the Islamophobic alliance to understand what is taking place. We also published the first comprehensive report on India, Islamophobia, stalking bigotry, documenting the PGP, RSS, defining what does it look like, the various ways from the love jihad that is being used to demonize Muslim, the beef eating, the social media type of instrumentalization, all that is there in order for us to document the development in India is literally a major crisis in that way. Challenging COVID-19 and India's Islamophobia. In India, they began to say that the Muslims were the ones spreading COVID because there was a gathering of the Jama'at al-Tabligh, and they really went to the races with this, even though that Modi was having hundreds of thousands showing up to his rallies, yet COVID was labeled as being Muslim, and Muslims are literally conspiratorial, in the same way that Trump in this country was saying that it was a Chinese virus. So you could actually see the comparisons in that way. So Islamophobia reporting app. So what we're asking you again is to help us in made Berkeley into the global hub for the Islamophobia studies field. Over 200 connected faculty and researchers, including Khalid, Beydoun, and others. We host visiting faculty. We host graduate student researchers, partner with academic and community organization, global conferences, consult for the UN on the Islamophobia report, which they declared March 15th as the International Islamophobia, Countering Islamophobia Day. So this is my presentation to you. If you find a way for you to support us, by all means, and if you know somebody that would help support us, by all means also reach out. If you want to invite us to your home for us and gather your family and friends, we'll be able to come and literally share it. Our work is not the same as what you call humanitarian relief, right? We often respond more in humanitarian relief. I see ourselves as diagnosing a problem in order to remedy before the problem occurs. So if you want to invest in a hospital and an ambulance, that's humanitarian relief, and I do so, right? I still support all of the humanitarian relief. If you want to build institutions to prevent down the line an ambulance or the hospital needed, then that's where some of the investment needs to do. And I think what we need is to balance some of our resources in that way. So jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Hatem. I think he already mentioned you have the envelopes on your table. It has multiple options, text or online or literally just write a check. I'm just wondering on behalf of our, just for our better understanding, what's like budget like for?
Our total budget for the year is about 400,000. Some years are more, some are, but that's our budget. You could calculate that that's $50 per research hour. If you think about the research hour, 50 hours, you know, a journal from beginning to end will cost between 15 to 20K just to get it out the door. So that's in terms of what we do. So it's $50 per research hour, and you calculate it. The India report, just for you, the India report cost us $67,000 to do, because we had 3 graduate students and 2 principal investigators in order to do so. So that one report by itself, $67,000.
I mean, this gives us an idea. Again, I think the work that the center does is dramatically different than the humanitarian. I mean, that's important also, not to undermine, God forbid, certainly, but this is something which is long-term investment for our generations to come. So please feel free to do the best that you can. And I think there are people who are watching online also. We need to address to you to do it online, either on website or via text, or email us. There's an email address as well on the envelope here, which is hello@iphobiacenter.org. That's the email address where you can email as well. I believe it's zakat eligible.
Yeah, zakat eligible. You could use the QR code.
Or QR code, more high tech. Any questions from any of you?
Yeah, if you have any questions, be more than happy to
And to Brother
answer.
Khalid also. Yes.
Which one? The material? Everything is available.
It's available.
Everything.
But with you speaking it or just?
Well, the research? The research is available because 139 article, right? So what we also used to do, we used to do a live stream discussion. So every time we release a journal, we'll have a conversation with some of the authors, right, in order for them to break down some of their material. Most of our conferences are recorded, so it's available also on YouTube. So you have YouTube, you could, some of these sessions are 2 hours, 3 hours each, so we record it and make it available. So the written material is available, and the conversations with authors and the conferences are available, all.
Were you asking of the slides itself?
Not just the slides, but the whole,
The data,
whole
okay.
experience, let's call it.
In fact, much of the material is also available in the back, so you can take a look at it. Of course, it's available for free download on the website and stuff. Sister Karima?
The speeches tonight are on YouTube?
Yeah, it should be on YouTube. It will be on our page. It will be on the Islamophobia studies page. Yeah, so it'll be available.
The QR code will take us to the website and we can find the link?
Yes.
What about social media platforms that have been disabled because of anti-Palestinian racism?
Well, that's an ongoing. We met with some of the social media platforms, some of the Muslim workers. Actually, we did a whole, I didn't go through the survey, but we did survey about, as Muslims living in the West and North America, people feel unsafe for themselves and their kids. So we met with the HR segments of the companies. We met with some of the social media companies. I'm actually making the argument that social media platforms should calibrate their algorithm to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights rather than for a profit margin and increasing addiction. And I think that's where how to translate Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You can add also the Fourth Geneva Convention to be the standard by which we measure the algorithm, right? Because today we know, at least there's cases against Facebook, there's cases against Twitter, there's cases against TikTok that is addictive. And it's understood this addiction is taking place because the algorithm actually try to reinforce your psychological pattern, and it actually is leading to devastating consequences. And I do think while critiquing and taking them to court, we also need to say, here's the corrective mechanism. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights that actually elevate the dignity of a human being as the foremost, both in business and our life. And I think we need to make those two arguments, challenge the algorithm that is, and push for them to change this, which deals with us some of the nefarious ways of the censoring that is occurring, especially on the two things that we found most censored are Palestine and then speaking about the Hindutva. So the data in both cases, I don't know if I have that in here, both the cases right? Yeah, the Hindutva, which is the Modi and the ultra-nationalist Indian right wing, because there is a large presence of Hindu nationalism supporters within the tech industry. They tend to actually limit the or censor that, and then also the presence of the caste within much of the tech industry. There was a bill in the state of California that passed the legislature, but ended up being vetoed by Newsom. So that's also part of how to do the research and make sure that we are challenging those things.
Mr. Karima,
Assalamu
I'll come to
alaikum.
you after.
Yeah. Hello?
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. And thank you for your work. I'm just curious because I'm a high school teacher and you said you had classroom materials. Do you have high school level materials?
Yeah, we actually worked on a report on how to counter Islamophobia in the school. We ran a training in the Sacramento School District. We're about to actually engage in the San Diego School District as well in order for us to how to counter it for the school system. So for sure, we could share that information.
On a personal level, what about threats to you and your institution and your authors?
Well, I don't know if you noticed when we came in here, there was security. There were people that were calling the hotel, demanding cancellation, that this is a pro-terrorist event and so on. So the demonization, and the hotel was concerned. So we're talking back and forth. We called Brother Hussam Al-Loush from CARE, where he actually intervened and called the hotel just to try to make sure that this is a hotel that the community uses many times, often, many of the events, but they ended up actually bringing security because of the circumstances that in here. So that's there. I would say that if you're engaged in Islamophobia work or in Palestine, death threats are common. On a slow day, I'll get 5, 6, 7 different emails, if not more. On a busy day, it's just like it'll be in the 100. So that's part. Our institutions do not respond to threats on us because we are seen as to be threatening. So you cannot be a Palestinian or a Muslim that you actually face a threat. So much so that when I got death threats with a hair scope in my mailbox, the police gave me a stress pamphlet, how to deal with stress. And I still have it in my drawer. So again, this is the circumstances that we face, our institutions in general, and most of our leaders in this country have been subject to the 4 S's. All right? And again, I talked to almost every Muslim leader of standing. They have gotten the 4 S's coming in and leaving. 4 S's, if you haven't, is like you're extra special. When you arrive in the airport, and the airline is. So when you arrive to the airport, they'll give you what you call VIP 4 escorts, as if you're like the prime minister of some place. And they escort you all the way up to the gate of the plane. So that's where we are, but I think we need to work to change it, and I'm very optimistic that change will come. And I do feel that we are living on a tipping point of transformation in this country.
So I have a question for you. Clearly, the Islamophobia Studies Center is one of the first of its kind in North America.
Yes.
Do you have similar support from outside North America, and how are you collaborating with others so that there is more power in numbers, if you will?
Well, I am a believer that you need to build others while you're also building yourself.
Yes.
And I am a collaborative person in all. If anybody have attended, and Khalid will speak about the conference in Berkeley, it's a community gathering for scholars, and they all feel that this is their home. So we have partnership with our dear brother in Leeds University, Salman Syed. He has a project and a program. He also, his journal, Reorient, is a partner journal for us. Jasmine Zain in Wilfrid Lawyer University. She's the vice president of the International Association. Salman Syed is the vice president from the UK. We have partnership all across UK. We have partnership in France, partnership in Spain, Bosnia, Herzegovina, or most of the Canadian universities, South Africa. We have also a cluster of people in India that works with us. I traveled to India myself, down to Kerala, Chennai, Cochin, and we have a number of students that studied with us in terms of how to work and deal with Islamophobia. And one of the ongoing research pieces we have is India. It's a major concern for us, so we engage with that. We have scholars in Turkey that work with us, Italy, Russia. Actually, we're one of the first to actually publish and engage with Russian scholars that working on the field of Islamophobia. Poland as well. Ireland, a number of scholars from Ireland. So we have about 200 scholars that literally work in a variety of fields. Centers, again, there's a few that have centers, but some major projects that are developing around Islamophobia.
Thank you.
The Muslim world, there's none.
Bravo to you, because
There's
you're
no
right.
center
no
in the Muslim
Muslims.
world. Thank you. Any
other questions or comments?
Just wondering if... Assalamu alaikum, thank you very
Wa alaikum
much.
salam.
I'm just wondering if you published a report about interfaith organization that's basically like, being funded by Islamophobic organizations.
Well, when the MLI case came out, Muslim Leadership Initiative, I wrote a series of 5 articles on the subject.
Would you mind, not everybody might
Oh, yeah.
know MLI. So
MLI, Muslim Leadership Initiative, was a project that was being funded and directed by the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, which was try to target young and upcoming Muslim leaders in this country, take them in partnership to Israel to train them and basically to see the world through a Zionist lens. And they came back and beginning to go around and speak, basically Zionists speak with a Muslim garb. And so that was something that unfolded. So we wrote a series of 5 articles on this idea. The interesting part is one of the people who was leading this initiative came and flew all the way to Berkeley to convince me to actually give a blessing to this initiative. And I said, I don't know what you're thinking. I'm leading the PDS movement. Right? So they were thinking that they're fishing possibly in some Kanafa water, but they didn't find anything in there. So that's, again, but we might put it together again in a comprehensive report for people to have. We're working on Christian Zionism as well. So we participated in the conference in Chile that was led by Palestinian Christians, President Mitri Rahib from Beit Lahem Dar al-Kalima University. Then we had another conference in Turkey this just past, I'm trying to remember my days, in June. And then there's a conference that he's called for in Amman in January. And this is just to deal with the Christian Zionism and the evangelicals, where the Palestinian Christians are taking the lead. And I'm trying to also provide what I call today is Muslim Zionist, which is a phenomenon that we need to speak about, Muslim Zionism, that begins to have almost a comparable. So that's the work. It's not only interfaith, it's even much more what you call, at least been far more problematic on trying to dress Zionism in a Muslim garb. Right?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Do you have any report about Muslim majority countries that somehow enabling Islamophobia?
Well, you're going to love me for this. Do you see that book in there? We have a whole book. And it was by both edited by Enes Barakli and Farid Hafiz. I have the first introductory chapter in there that defines what do we mean by Islamophobia in Muslim majority states.
With your permission, if I
Yeah.
can add answer to your question also, right? So MLI was for the upcoming young Muslim imams and leaders. There is another segment to it, which is established imams and Muslim organizations were funded by AJC, by Jewish Federation, who went to Palestine, quote unquote, to Masjid al-Aqsa, not to other cities in the occupied Palestine, but they spent most of the time in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, in other places, and then came back and talked about interfaith. So I think it is incumbent upon us as Muslims, as members of our masajid and our communities, when our imams or our masajid or the Muslim organizations who we support and serve, when they go on these trips, we need to ask, who is funding it?
Yeah, so that's one book. And then the Islamophobia and Psychiatry, that's also a book that was edited. I also have the initial chapter defining the fields of Islamophobia, and now we're actually about to update for the second volume, which is from the field of psychiatry. You have to identify that you actually have a, what you call a medical issue, right? I do believe that Muslims, all Muslims, face PTSD from Islamophobia. If you watch TV and you have been seeing the past 30 years, you are actually suffering from a medical condition because of this Islamophobia that you are consuming that sometimes gets you to be completely immobilized. So again, you have a psychiatry that is beginning to look at the field and actually look at it from a medical background. So if you don't have a research on it, again, we have a research and we have the work that is being done.
If there are no other, oh, sorry, you have.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for your talk. I have a question, like, is it possible for us to commission a study of, for example, Orange County to see what the infrastructure is at large? I'm specifically speaking as a parent of children in the K through 12 system and, you know, with families and who have encountered this really obvious Islamophobia, hostility to Islam and Muslims, and in our school district, in our city, and even at the county level.
We, you know, again, we could put a team together. We did not on Islamophobia, but I did the Bay Area Muslim study, which studied 5 counties to study the Muslim community. We did a survey of 1,100 survey. We did 6 focus groups to get actually the data, and then I assisted, was the main advisor for the Illinois civic engagement study that was just released last year. So if there's an interest of the community, we could, again, design the study and shape it, and then go out and find what the data look like. So, you know, it's just a matter of A, B, and C in terms of research.
Looks like there are no other questions. Oh, you do, please.
How is Islamophobia related to other forms of discrimination? Yeah, well, just to give you, when I set up the project at UC Berkeley, I set it up with ethnic studies, and specifically in the Center for Race and Gender. I did not want to see Islamophobia as part of the Middle East studies. Right? Because Middle East studies is a particular type of genre. In here, Islamophobia, per the group in the UK, the all-parliamentary group, Islamophobia is a type of racism, right, that targets Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. So in this sense, it emerges out of the same cluster of racial discourses and racism, even though that somebody says, well, Islam is not a race. Yes, but people can be racialized based on a variety of aspects. So you could be discriminated based on your skin tone, you could be discriminated based on your language, you could be discriminated on your immigration status, and you could be discriminated because of your religious background, anti-Semitism, right? Because of the experience of Jewish people historically. So in this sense, we attach it to the long history of otherization and racism, and I'm very vehement not to actually think of it as an adjunct to Middle East studies, because it's not actually part of Middle East studies, it's a part of historical discrimination, otherization, which begins actually in Europe, European history. If you, the Inquisition, all right, the expulsion of Muslims and Jews beginning with the 1400s, culminating in 1492, and with it also putting 100,000 women to the stake and burn them alive by being accused of being witches and sorcerers as a way to reconstitute the Catholic Orthodoxy. So you have to put that history when you're speaking about the history of Islamophobia and what its connection to other forms of racism, rather than anytime you speak about Islamophobia, well, what about Saudi Arabia, right? That's usually you get the retort, or what about this and this, which makes you not actually think of the racism that exists in the country that you are in, and you're not, let's say, a representative, right? You know, often people say, what about Saudi Arabia? Say, why don't you ask George Bush, because MBS is his friend. Why don't you ask him about Saudi Arabia rather than ask me? Right? So again, how to respond to these issues from a broader anti-racist perspective.
All right.
Thank you.
I think Jazakallah khair, Dr. Hatem, Brother Khalid. So one of you asked about the death threat, right? So we got emails and phone calls, and one of the email was, the two most provocative academic activists are going to be in Orange County. So congratulations for the on behalf of the Islamophobia Center, Islamophobia Center, and Dr. Hatem and Professor Khalid, Jazakallah khair to all of you for taking the time and being here this evening. I'd like to close with a story of hope. We have among us a young lady who I would adopt as a daughter of mine any minute if her father allows me to. Her name is Jannah. Is she around here? Stand up, stand up. This young lady had the courage that many of us don't. When she was graduating from her college, she spoke about Palestine so damn proudly that it makes me cry. We are proud of you, we love you. It is in you that we have hope that Palestine, inshallah, shall be liberated one day. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.